finally getting to get this video out. I would have liked to do this video at the end of 2024, but there were still too many games I had left to play. There was almost a part of the video where I was going to mention like big games that I really wanted to play that I didn't get to, and I ended up getting like 7 new games for Christmas, so I wanted to try to beat most of them before getting this video out. A couple of them I did end up dropping, but I pretty much beat most of them, so now I'm finally ready. So, welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And finally, it's time. As you can tell from the title, today I want to talk about my favorite games of 2024. Now, you know how this video goes if you've seen the videos I've done on this in past years, but basically I start off by doing an intro where I talk about the landscape of gaming, though this year I'm probably not going to do that quite as much just because, like, console wars and stuff are kind of blasé at this point. But I'll make some mention of how the year was. I'll go over some big games I didn't play, some games that just missed the cut of my 2 proper lists, games that would be like a 7 out of 10 on my scale, the cream before the crop, which would be like 8 or 9 out of 10 games, and then my proper best list of 10 out of 10 games. So again, like I said, I got a lot to discuss here in terms of games, so let's just get right into the intro. 2024. Like I said, not going to be diving too deep into the console landscape because at this point, console wars to me are kind of blasé, especially as consoles are starting to put their games on other platforms. We started to see that big time in 2024 with Microsoft putting some of their big Xbox releases on PlayStation and Switch. 2024, though, was a bit of a weird year in gaming because in terms of the actual landscape in the industry, it was a year that was pretty tumultuous in terms of the sheer amount of layoffs. Like, 2023 was already pretty rough in terms of layoffs, but it felt like 2024 pretty much did what 2023 did in layoffs in like the first 2 months, and it was really disheartening to constantly read about developers, you know, losing their jobs and big companies closing down and things like that. It was really, really sad. It's a worrying thing in this industry, you know? Like, there's a real human element to making these games. So seeing these people lose their jobs is really, really disheartening. These people go into this medium because it's given them so much joy, and now it proves to be the bane of their existence. It's very, very sad. And this year it felt like I was constantly reading about different companies going through layoffs, and every single time it just felt so unfortunate. I'm hoping for something better in the future, some more stability in this industry. But at risk of an awkward transition, we are here to talk about the actual games that released, and 2024 was a year that to me felt a bit sneaky good. Coming off of a year as loaded as 2023, a year that many consider one of the best years for game releases, it was going to be hard to follow up, and for the first few months, 2024 couldn't. But as the year went on, it felt like there were plenty more great games, and I think that there was a lot to enjoy this year. I ended up playing a lot of games this year, and there was a lot that I really, really liked. And maybe it felt a little lighter because a lot of the games were re-releases, but even some of the new games that came along were really surprising and fun. And it's definitely impressive that we were still able to get a solid amount of very good games in 2024 in spite of all the chaos going on around the industry. So a lot of credit has to be given there. Notably, because we're just going to jump right into the games now, there were quite a few big games this year that I didn't play. In terms of the biggest ones, like the big Game of the Year type contenders, I didn't play Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree because I didn't play the base game, and I don't play Souls-like, so why was I going to play this? Didn't play Metaphor ReFantazio because I don't really play Atlas games, but I heard really, really great things about this one. I have some close friends that have said that it's fantastic. Did not play Black Myth Wukong because, again, just not really my kind of action game. And I guess I'll also mention that I didn't play Helldivers 2, which was one of the year's bigger multiplayer games, but I'm not a huge multiplayer guy, at least online multiplayer, so this one didn't really do all that much for me. Although in terms of games I didn't play that I wanted to play, I didn't get to play Space Marine 2, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, and I also didn't get to play Balatro, but honestly, given what I've heard about Balatro, it may be for the best that I haven't played it yet. I've mentioned in previous videos getting addicted to games like Power Wash Simulator and Vampire Survivors, and from what I've heard of Balatro, if I ended up playing this game before this video was filmed, I might not have gotten this video out until like July. Still want to try it out, but I'm kind of glad I've held my horses just because of how addicting I've heard it is. I mean, it's a deck builder roguelike, and it's poker themed. How could it not be addicting? In terms of games that just missed the cut, we do have a couple here. Penny's Big Breakaway, which wasn't the peak 3D platformer I was expecting it to be when I first saw gameplay of it, but in spite of its warts, it still had some fun and unique concepts for the genre. There was also Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit. By God, I actually enjoyed a Five Nights at Freddy's game. Granted, most of that was because it did something different, not fully how that different thing was executed. though it's still the most interesting thing the franchise has done with its gameplay in my opinion. We also had LEGO Horizon Adventures, a cute enough take on the Horizon franchise even though it got repetitive after a while, and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Rita's Revenge, which was a fairly standard arcade style beat 'em up but with some fun switch ups, and I definitely got the vibe while playing it that the developers really cared about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers when making it, so I think that really helps. So now we can get on to the proper lists, but I want to point out, I know in some of the last few Legacy Year videos I did, I usually would talk about some remasters at this part of the video, some like cream before the crop type remasters, but given that we have a fairly light list this time, I'm going to include them. I mean, hey, if I wanted to artificially lengthen the video, I could talk about how Sony actually started re-releasing PS2 games on PS5, and use that as a means to wax poetic about the Sly Cooper trilogy and Time Splitters Future Perfect, but I won't do that. Actually, if I were to do that, Sly 1 and 2 would go into the honorable mentions section because to me they're 10 out of 10 games. Either way, let's get on with the cream before the crop. Let's be real. Ubisoft did not have a good year, and honestly, I'm not really a huge fan of theirs one way or another, so I didn't exactly bawl my eyes out when Skull and Bones came out and didn't do too well. In fact, at one point, I didn't think it was ever going to come out, so the fact that it actually did was quite an accomplishment. But it's a shame that Ubisoft had a bad year and carried such a bad reputation, because I feel like that took away from the one genuinely great game that they put out this year, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Bringing back Prince of Persia as a 2.5D Metroidvania was definitely a surprising choice, but it worked out in a really great way. This was actually my first time playing a Prince of Persia game, and I'm glad I made this one my first. This is a super polished and well-crafted Metroidvania that pretty much fires on all cylinders in terms of gameplay, level design, visuals, and writing. That definitely feels like a beautiful return for the franchise. I've said this before, but honestly, after playing the game, I don't even really feel like I need that Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake that they were making, because this was good enough for me. It's really a fantastic game, and it kind of breaks my heart that it didn't really get the love that it deserved this year. If you haven't gotten a chance to play it, do yourself a favor. Also, it makes me sad to hear that I think they broke up the development team that made the game. That really sucks. Sorry, what's this I hear that they're making them make a new Rayman game, though? Speaking of games and franchises that I don't have much previous experience with, here's Tekken. Despite its status as an iconic fighting game, I didn't have any real experience with the Tekken franchise. The most I really had experience with was in the form of Pokken Tournament, if you count that as a Tekken game, and in playing as Kazuya in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So compared to franchises like, well, Smash, and say Mortal Kombat that I at least have played, Tekken often kind of flew over my head. But Tekken 8 looks so incredible that I had to jump on it, and yeah, it's a great game. It can be a fair bit challenging because, to my understanding, at least going into the game, Tekken does have quite a learning curve to it. Again, since this is my first one, I don't really know for sure. But the combat is so slick and fun that it's worth digging into to learn the game. And playing through the story mode, I got the chance to try out a lot of the game's roster of characters, and they all felt really, really good to me. Good sense of balance, and the overall action here is super badass. And obviously, the game is utterly breathtaking to look at on top of being incredible to play. I'm glad I finally got to jump in on the Tekken series with this one, because this is a great game. Kudos to Bandai Namco for being such a damn good publisher. Man, we're really talking about a lot of franchises I experienced for the first time right now, aren't we? My only real experience with the Mario vs. Donkey Kong franchise back in the day was a little bit of Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis on the DS. And again, barely even that. But seeing that the original Mario vs. Donkey Kong was getting a remake, I thought it'd be fun to give it a shot, especially given that I've been getting more interested in puzzle games lately. And it may not be one of the greatest Switch games, but did it have to be? I really don't think so. Games like this, I feel, really served as kind of just lighter holdover type titles while Nintendo gets the Switch 2 ready. And in that regard, I think it fulfilled that task incredibly well. Even though the controls were a bit awkward in some pockets and the boss fights were not super interesting, this has plenty of charming puzzle platformer gameplay with some nice quality of life improvements to the original game. And God, is the visual style here so fun and adorable. Really, it feels like the Switch has been like a haven for Nintendo to revive some dormant franchises and sub-franchises, and it's been awesome to see that Mario vs. Donkey Kong got another chance to live this year. Hopefully it means a greater future for this series, perhaps an entirely new game at some point. Yep. It's honestly quite funny because I'm more of a dog person than a cat person, but it's honestly hard for me to resist when a game comes along that lets me play as a cat. I mean, dude. Cat. I named mine Kit Kat. It's a cat. But yeah, Little Kitty Big City showed up on Xbox Game Pass, so I looked at it for a few seconds and kind of just thought, nah, what the hell. And I'm glad I did because I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's obviously a super adorable game, just look at that punum, but it can actually be very fun to play as well. It's very simplistic, but not overwhelmingly so, and the open world design does nicely capture the feel of being a tiny cat in a giant world. This game really makes you feel like Batman. I'm Catman. Cat. Sorry. It knows what it's trying to do, and it does it very well. And I like that the chaos the game lets you get into kind of gives it like an Untitled Goose Game type vibe. I kind of myself have been calling it Untitled Cat Game. It's very short, but honestly, I was kind of okay with that because it felt like the game didn't really overstay its welcome. Just to compare it to another cat-based game, where a game like Stray, to me, kind of overstayed its welcome because it didn't feel like it had much to offer other than, oh my god, cat! I think this game knew its limits and didn't really try to stretch it too far. It's a charming game that's definitely worth trying, and a nice debut for the indie team at Double Dagger Studios. Now someone give me a game where I can play as a puppy. Okay, so I will leave my discussion on this just a little bit shorter because I talked about Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon in my 2013 video, so I don't need to reiterate that I think this is a really fun game. What I will point out is that this re-release, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, was my first proper experience with the game, and I'm glad I finally got to use this as a chance to jump into it. As I said before, I think Luigi's Mansion 2 is a great game and an underrated title that was a nice change-up from the first game, and while it's my understanding that this re-release doesn't necessarily change a bunch from the 3DS original, it's just nice to have this on a console. Because given that the game is fairly beefy for a handheld game, just on a personal level, it took me about 14 hours to complete, it feels like this game always would have made sense on a home console. Even with the more mission-based structure of the game, it actually, I think, was longer than the first Luigi's Mansion. So, again, given that people focus a lot on gameplay hours with console games versus handheld games, I think that this absolutely would have belonged on a console, which is why I'm glad it's there now. If you haven't played Luigi's Mansion 2, definitely give it a shot with this HD re-release. Speaking of re-releases, is this another opportunity for me to wax poetic about Night Dive Studios and why they're the kings and queens and non-binary royalty of this gaming industry? It looks like it is. Doom plus Doom 2 was a bit of a surprise this year because it just randomly showed up on Xbox Game Pass, and given that Doom and Doom 2 had already gotten re-released, I didn't think we were going to get another re-release of them. But with Night Dive handling it, I knew we were going to get something good. And quite honestly, you could probably take everything I said last year in my video about Night Dive's Quake 2 remaster and just kind of apply it here, between both the quality of the remaster and the pricing model at play here. An incredible re-release of Doom and Doom 2 in the Kex engine, complete with all the expansions plus a brand new one, for $10, plus it's on Game Pass, plus you can upgrade to the new versions for free if you own either game on not just Steam, but any platform. Seriously, I got this through Game Pass, so I was playing on an Xbox, but I also have the previous 2020 re-releases of Doom 1 and Doom 2 on Switch, so I was able to upgrade to this new version on my Switch as well, which is pretty awesome. Totally free too, what a steal. Like sure, having just played the master levels with one of my close friends, I could rant about how bad they are, but that doesn't take away from this release as a whole. It's crazy that it, along with all the other expansions, are here, and to me it makes this the new definitive versions of Doom 1 and 2. If you're looking to get into these classic Doom games, do it through this collection. Night Dive, you are just incredible. Thank God we have a developer like them that actually cares about preserving games with respect. Let's go back to the indie front for a minute to talk about a game you guys probably haven't heard of and honestly should. Gory Cuddly Carnage, if you don't know, is an action game made by the 3-person development team at Angry Demon Studio, where you play as a toy cat who rides on a talking hoverboard that also serves as a murder weapon that Gory uses to brutally murder a bunch of mass-produced toys from an evil corporation. Again, I promise I'm straight edge. I don't know how this game even popped on my radar. I think my brother just heard about it and grabbed it, but I honestly really enjoyed it. I will say that it almost ruined itself for me because there was a bug in the game that deleted my save data when I got through 6 out of the 8 chapters, but the team at Angry Demon were so kind to me when I reported the problem that I just really wanted to give the game another chance just because they were so apologetic and so nice. And when I did give it another chance, I really enjoyed my time with it. I love how over the top and ridiculous it is because, I mean, with a concept that goofy, of course, you gotta be a little over the top and you gotta play off of that. And I also love how the gameplay feels like a throwback to an older era of action games, almost like something you'd play on like the Xbox 360 back in the day. It's very unique, and despite some bugginess, I think it lays a great foundation for the team at Angry Demon. With a little more polish, I can only see them growing from here with their future output. And honestly, I hope with their future output that they continue to be as off the wall and weird as they were with this game. Because this concept is definitely out there. I hope they keep making games with as out there concepts as this one. This may honestly be one of the best ideas for a game collection that I've seen, and one of the best overall game collections that I have played. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics, what a tongue twister of a title, offers 7 games from or aligned with the Marvel vs. Capcom series, which was great news for me because even though I love Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I didn't have a ton of experience with the classics in the franchise. I was more than happy to get to experience those classics here, especially Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which, now that I've played through it, is definitely my favorite in the franchise and by far one of the greatest fighting games ever created. It was also pretty interesting that they included the Punisher game, which to my understanding didn't really have like a proper console port up to this point, so it's nice to see that that's here. And in terms of presentation and emulation, this is pretty much arcade perfect. There's plenty of extra content, and it's nice that this collection lets you adjust the difficulty of each game before you take them for a ride. The only things I can really knock are that each game only has 1 save slot, and since all of them are based on their arcade versions, features from the console ports are not here. But otherwise, this is an awesome collection, and one that definitely comes very highly recommended. Let's tackle one more indie game. I put indie in air quotes because it's published by Devolver Digital, so I don't know if it necessarily counts as indie. Nevertheless, let's talk about one more smaller game. The Plucky Squire was a game I've been looking forward to for a few years before it finally released last year because it just seemed like such a clever and unique concept. It's like a Zelda-esque 2D adventure game that takes place in a storybook, but once you jump out of the storybook, it becomes a 3D platformer. It seemed like such a unique concept that I was really excited to finally get to play in 2024, and thankfully, it largely lived up to my anticipation. I mean, yes, I can say that it does take a minute for the game to get into its more clever elements, but I did enjoy that the gameplay felt very varied without losing its overall identity, and the switches between 2D and 3D were actually quite enjoyable and in service to the game as a whole. I also think the game has a really charming and wonderful art style that makes it even more joyous and personality-filled. It may not be 2024's best game, but it is a very good one, and given the years-long wait for it, I think it panned out very well. Definitely excited to see how the development team at All Possible Futures builds on this game in the future. The one constant in the game industry, and life in general I'd say, is the element of surprise. No, you can't necessarily prepare yourself to be surprised by something, but you know that there are always going to be surprises. And in 2024, this was one of them. Epic Mickey was a game I remember being very excited for when I was 12 years old back in 2010, but it never really lived up to my hype and I found myself not really all that into it. So when a remake was announced early in 2024, I was honestly very surprised, though somewhat optimistic because it was being developed by Purple Lamp, the team behind some of the recent great SpongeBob games, Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated and The Cosmic Shake. I thought it was a very surprising announcement, but I was much more surprised with how much I enjoyed the game as a whole. It's a much smoother, much more fun version of the game that vastly improves on the platforming gameplay of the original and just feels far more intuitive to play. Across the board, this feels much more like the version of the game I was hoping for back in 2010. While playing this one, I had those moments where I was like, now I see it. When I tried to play the original, I was like, oh, it's just missed potential. But now I'm like, okay, I get it. It's glitchy in a few pockets, but those glitches are minor inconveniences in what's an overall great recreation by Purple Lamp. They're just super good at what they do, and I'm glad they did this one so solidly. And I can tell you, 12-year-old me is finally feeling very gratified that he ended up enjoying Epic Mickey. He's probably wearing his old Epic Mickey shirt as he feels that gratification. You guys can largely thank this game for the video taking longer, and that's not because it's achingly long. In fact, it's probably on the shorter end of the Zelda games I've played. It's just that it was the last 2024 game that I had to beat since I didn't get it until, like I said, Christmas time, along with 6 other games. Again, 7 games Even as someone who can beat my games fast, that's a lot. But yes, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom finally did something no mainline Zelda game had done before by letting gamers actually play as Zelda instead of Link. So finally, when your grandma sees who you're playing as in your Zelda game and she goes, "Oh, is that Zelda?" she'll actually be correct. And I gotta say, this managed to be one of my overall favorite gaming experiences I had with any 2024 release. I was initially really uncertain how Nintendo was going to handle a Zelda game with a de-emphasis on combat, but this game did it excellently because of the sheer creativity offered to you thanks to the echoes. With the overall sense of freedom in exploring and handling combat, it kind of feels like this game is like a meeting of the worlds between the Link's Awakening remake and Tears of the Kingdom in the best way possible. And given that Zelda can be a bit challenging at times, at least for a simple person like me, I'm very happy to have a Zelda game that's a bit easier this time around. Like, sometimes Zelda games can be very guide gamey for me, but because this game is so creative in how it lets you handle different things, I didn't feel like I really needed a guide all that often. I could just create something and boom, I did it right. There's so many ways in the game to do it correctly when you're completing a mission, so I think that really helps. And as someone who often considers Zelda a one-and-done kind of franchise, like I play them once, enjoy the hell out of them, but never really want to play them again, this feels like a game I honestly would be down to replay at some point in the future. It was just that fun. I would have given it a 10 if the AI of some of the echoes wasn't as dumb as a burger bun, but all in all, it's a fantastic game, and yet another reminder of just how good Grezzo is at handling the Zelda IP. Or is it Grezzo? I think it's Grezzo. Either way, great game, definitely play it. Near the tail end of the year, yes, I did end up playing Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, a game I was pretty excited about even as someone who doesn't really follow Dragon Ball Z. Part of it was because as a kid, I did enjoy the little bit that I played of the Budokai Tenkaichi games, so seeing Budokai Tenkaichi 4 finally come along got me very excited. It's called Sparking because that's the name of the sub-series over in Japan, so I guess they just wanted to keep it consistent both ways. So on its own, it was great to see Budokai Tenkaichi make a comeback, but it was even better that the game ended up being very good. Even before playing it, I was watching a close friend of mine play it, and it blew my mind just how much content this game has. Like, the devs really care about DBZ and the lore and really pleasing the fans, and the sheer amount of content here is definitely perfect if you're a hardcore DBZ lover. But even if you're like me and you know fuck all about DBZ, the game is great because the mechanics are as fun as you remember, and the story mode has plenty of the awesome action set pieces that you hope for out of Dragon Ball Z. In the context of games based on this franchise, it doesn't quite scale the heights of my favorite Dragon Ball game, Dragon Ball FighterZ, but on its own, this is a really great game and one that I can highly recommend. It's really great to have gotten Budokai Tenkaichi back this year, and I definitely hope it sticks around. Technically, this is a game I didn't give a proper 0 to 10 rating to this year because as it is, I don't actually own it yet. My experience with this game is largely from playing it pretty regularly with a close friend of mine who does own it. I do kind of want to grab my own copy of it because I've heard there's a bit more content for the single player here, but as it is, I'm just speaking on my experience from playing it with others, as Mario Party is supposed to be played. Even though I don't have a proper rating though, it would definitely score very high if I did. Because I've enjoyed the previous Mario Party games on the Switch, but Super Mario Party Jamboree, or as I sometimes like to call it, Big Mario Party Big Party, shout out to Chari5, is even an improvement on those games. The amount of polish at play here is utterly insane, even more so than the already solid polish in the last few titles, and it really feels like Nintendo Cube has gotten the hang of the Mario Party series at this point. Like, I did love Mario Party Superstars, and as someone who didn't have much experience with the older Mario Parties, it was great to see these older courses and mini-games come back, but at the same time, it was cool to see Nintendo Cube apply that level of polish and then some to a brand new Mario Party game with Jamboree. I feel like I've said this with the previous entries, but I'll say it again, this is the most fun I've had with Mario Party in a long time. I mean, yeah, I still suck at it as a luck-based game, so that happens, but that's alright. It's really fun and a really great development of the Mario Party series. I know, you guys are probably just as surprised as I am, and I honestly don't think I can fully comprehend this, but in the big year 2024, I actually, unequivocally, without a shadow of a doubt and without adding any qualifiers to the deal, enjoyed a Call of Duty game. Now, normally I wouldn't even touch a new Call of Duty game because, well, duh. But since this was on Xbox Game Pass, I chose to give it a shot because, as I always say, when you're subscribed to a service that gives you hundreds of games for a monthly price and a game like this shows up, what reason do you have to say no, right? And after playing through the campaign, I'm gonna be honest, and this is the wildest sentence to come out of my mouth, so I'm gonna say it, and I'm not even gonna look at my script. I'm gonna look dead into the lens of the camera so you know how real this is. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is the most fun that I have had with a Call of Duty game since the original Modern Warfare game that came out in 2007. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. I really enjoyed the game that much, and I'm utterly shocked at that. But it feels like the longer development cycle this game actually got gave them a chance to cook with this one, and it pays off. There's a level of gameplay variation to the campaign, the likes of which you don't often really get out of a Call of Duty campaign, and it actually makes for a pretty thrilling adventure. I mean, I mostly played the game for that, but I did give the multiplayer and zombies a shot. In the case of the multiplayer, I mean, it's COD multiplayer, it's fun. I didn't notice a huge difference with the omnidirectional movement, but I'm sure there was one. But with zombies, I'm very happy to see them return to the classic style of zombies, especially after whatever the hell Vanguard zombie mode was. Seriously, I played Vanguard zombies at a friend's house once, and what the fuck? But yeah, I did genuinely enjoy my time with this, and for the first time in a while, I can unequivocally say that a new Call of Duty game was very good. Hey, even in this hellish life that we live in, miracles can happen when you least expect them. And to close out the cream before the crop, let's stick to talking about Game Pass for just a little longer. I feel like I'm saying this quite a bit throughout this video, but we have another game based on an IP I genuinely don't pay much mind to. I'm gonna potentially destroy my reputation a little bit, but a couple years ago, I tried to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, and for whatever reason, I honestly just couldn't get into it. I'm sorry. Please, stop. It's just my opinion. So being that I'm not too into Indiana Jones, you might not think I would care much for a video game based on the property, but as I've said before, my love of gaming supersedes my love of IPs, so if a game looks good and it's based on a franchise I don't care for, I'll still give it a chance if I'm interested. Plus, Indiana Jones in the Great Circle was developed by Machine Games, who I love, and being that it's Bethesda published and Bethesda's owned by Microsoft, it was on Game Pass, so why not give it a chance? No real reason to say no, and I'm glad I didn't say no because I really enjoyed it. Even as someone who's not too into the franchise, this is largely exactly what I'd hoped an Indiana Jones game would play like, and while the combat takes some getting used to, it definitely proved very solid in the end. The visuals are also utterly incredible, and the writing is very faithful to the franchise, though it does hug the source material a bit tightly, to the point where I think hardcores will get a little more out of it than non-hardcore fans will. I've talked a bit lately about licensed games that, while good, I feel like I can only recommend to hardcore fans. Games like Hogwarts Legacy and RoboCop Rogue City, which I feel like don't really have a whole lot of appeal if you're not super into the IP. And Indiana Jones isn't that kind of game, but I do think it leans a bit close to the for hardcores only territory for me. Like, it's really pushing up against the line. Still, it does more than enough to appeal to the non-hardcores, and I think it's another excellent showcase of just how good Machine Games really is. Now, where's that Wolfenstein 3 game they've been teasing? Alright, so now we're on to the proper best list of 10 out of 10 games, though there are two honorable mentions. These are games that were remastered in 2024 that wouldn't make the list proper because they're not really, like, remakes or anything like that. To blow through them, I know this one technically might count as a remake, but I'm just putting it here. I'm gonna go with the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake. It's more like a remaster than a remake to me, and that's why it's not on the proper list, because it doesn't feel totally different from the original. But the original is one of the greatest games ever, so bringing it back on the Switch with some cuts to the backtracking is music to my ears, even though it stinks a tiny bit that it's 30 frames per second this time around. And the other honorable mention is Sonic X Shadow Generations. It's practically Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury with Sonic, but to me that's a good thing. It's one of Sonic's best games on modern platforms, which is all well and good, and it still plays great. And especially after the launch of Sonic Colors Ultimate, it's nice that this one is much more polished. And it's got an exciting new side game that, in this case, I would honestly say stands as one of my favorites in the franchise. It's kind of what would have happened if Sega actually locked in when making Shadow the Hedgehog many, many years ago. Shadow Generations is an excellent mix of the Generations gameplay and Sonic Frontiers, and I think it lays a great groundwork for the future of the franchise. So now let's get on to the proper best list of 10 out of 10 games, and there are two games here, so we're not going to be at this part for a long time. Starting off at the number 2 spot, this was one of my most anticipated games coming into the year, and it absolutely delivered. I definitely got to go with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. You probably won't be surprised to see this here, and in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it tops some of your own Game of the Year lists. It was at the top of mine until later in the year. You could probably guess why. But this game genuinely blows my mind, because I have no idea how Square was able to top Final Fantasy VII Remake with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but somehow they did. Even with the knowledge that this would be a 3-part game, I did not know how Part 2 could be better than Remake. But Rebirth actually topped Remake for me, and this game just consistently blew my mind. It's crazy how they managed to make the gameplay even more varied compared to Remake while also improving on the pitch-perfect combat of that game, and the overall design is so incredible and fantastic to explore. There's a lot of game here, which could be overwhelming for some, but even as someone who's not too into longer games, this one never lost my interest. I was just enjoying it the entire way through. It's also an utterly beautiful game. The music is fantastic. This is Final Fantasy, of course it is. And the storytelling hits all the right emotional notes incredibly well. Like, seriously, this game emotionally hits like a truck to me. And I know because I've done this in previous videos, some people are expecting this to be the part where I start thirsting about Tifa or something like that, but I'm not limiting myself to her this time around. I'm gonna get a bit more general. Why are so many characters in this game so hot? Like, seriously, FF7 Rebirth is a bisexual's nightmare. They're all so hot, and it's insane. Sorry, that's a tangent, but beyond the hot point, I do love these characters in this game so much, and I think that's a huge testament to the overall writing in the game. That I really, really care about them and their arcs and their journeys, and like I said, the big moments in the game hit like a truck because these characters are just so lovable. I'm utterly blown away by what Square did here. It's a really fantastic game, and geez, how the hell are they going to top this with Part 3? But despite all that, there is one game from 2024 that tops it, and again, you guys are probably already screaming it at the screen because you already know what it is. I said in my most anticipated games of 2025 videos that my most anticipated game of this year is the game I don't know about yet, and that applied to 2024. My most anticipated game of the year, I thought, was FF7 Rebirth, but it was a game that got announced later, that came out later, and you already know, my favorite game of 2024, I gotta go with Astro Bot. Wow, only the second time ever that my personal game of the year was the same as the Game Awards choice for game of the year. And thank God it went to this one. Again, I would have been fine no matter what one. Maybe I would have been a little weirded out about Shadow the Erdtree winning because it's an expansion. But honestly, I don't pay attention to what wins anyway. It doesn't change my opinion. But I was really, really happy to see this game win. As someone who loved the previous Astro Bot games, I was more than excited to see this little guy finally get a full-length game. But even with my unbelievable excitement for it, I don't know if I was fully ready for what this game would do to me. I'm going to give a take right now that's gonna blow some people's minds, and some people might say that I'm glazing or whatever the term is these days. And if you want to consider this glazing, well then let me fry this donut Krispy Kreme style. And again, let me look directly into the camera lens so you know I'm not kidding. This is genuinely one of my top 5 favorite games of all time, and it's my favorite game that Sony has published. Again, I'm not kidding. I absolutely adore this game to bits. In one breath, yes, this is a game that's absolutely loaded with Sony Easter eggs and gaming goodness, but as much as there was talk about all these references in the game, this is a game that to me would be just as good if it didn't have all of the Easter eggs. Largely because it's just such a tightly made, fun, and confident platformer that feels like an incredible growth for Team Asobi. Like, the previous Astro Bot games were already incredible, but the way they were able to continue pushing themselves here is honestly unbelievable to me. And it felt like this game, from a gameplay perspective, just constantly had me saying, wow. With each new level, I was constantly charmed by how unique and varied the game was, and I can honestly say, if any non-Nintendo developer has ever come close to making a platformer that can stand alongside the best 3D Super Mario Bros. Games, it's definitely Team Asobi with this game. It's another one of those games that I was playing, and with each new level I kept thinking, what are they going to do next? I was constantly blown away. It's truly a magical game that I'm so happy to see get the recognition that it's deserved, and has won as many Game of the Year awards as it has won. And I truly hope we get more games like this from Sony. Like, I know I enjoy the AAA games as much as the next guy, but I'd love to see Sony take a chance on some more AA type games such as this. And platformers, because, you know, they really made some headway with platformers back in the early eras of PlayStation. And I feel like I especially want that because games like this remind me of why I love and believe in gaming. And they remind me that no matter how much this industry pursues deeper stories and higher production values and cinema quality graphics and what have you, excellent gameplay always wins overall. Astro Bot, incredible game. Definitely go play this game if you haven't already. I honestly can't wait to replay it. I'm probably going to end up doing that very soon. Whew, okay, so that is finally out of the way. My favorite games of 2024. And thankfully, despite the fact that I have this cough that you haven't seen in the video because obviously I've cut out any coughing, I still have a voice and my throat doesn't hurt, so thank God. Granted, I feel like I sound a little nasally. Maybe you noticed that in the last few videos. I don't know what happened there, but thankfully this list is finally out And like I said, 2024 actually was a sneaky good year for new games. There was a lot that I really enjoyed, and obviously one of my top 5 favorite games of all time came out in 2024, so very fun stuff. And as you saw in my last video, one of my most anticipated games of 2025, I think we got a lot to look forward to this year. Most especially that Switch 2. Can't wait to see more of that. Until then, this is all just my opinion on 2024 as a year in gaming. What were your favorite games of the year? Were they games I mentioned in this video? Were they games I didn't mention in this video? What was your personal game of the year this year? And I didn't really have like a particular question of the video in mind like I did with my legacy years, but I guess I'll do this. Since I talked about quite a few re-releases in this video, what is your favorite gaming remake, remaster, re-release, what have you? Whatever your thoughts and opinions are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And now that that's out of the way, as for what's next with long form videos, I kind of mentioned this in a community post, but I thought I'd mention it here in a proper video. I don't know what 2025 is necessarily going to look like for longer videos. Now that the series within a series is over and all the favorite games of legacy year videos are done, I'm not going to have another series within a series that I'm going to be committing to throughout this year. And again, as I'm pretty busy with my job, I don't have quite as much time to commit to YouTube because, again, I would like to, but, you know, I don't get paid through YouTube. Again, not that that's a bad thing. I like doing YouTube regardless of whether I get paid or not, but obviously, you know, I'm an adult. I gotta make money somehow. So because I've been busy with my job, I haven't been able to focus as much on YouTube. I'm still doing the short form album reviews, of course. You're still gonna get those every weekend, or maybe the Monday after, whatever, you get the point. I don't know how often I'm going to be doing long form videos. I do have quite a few ideas. I think for my next video, I don't want to say what it is yet, but I think I want to do something baseball related. I do really enjoy baseball. And again, this channel is called Matt's Random Journeys, so I'd like to just play off that random part. Also, you guys know I like to do videos on gaming showcases when they happen, so I will probably do that this year, like on different Nintendo Directs, PlayStation State of Plays, things like that. So I'm still going to be putting videos out, I just don't know how consistent I'll be, so if there are long breaks, just bear with me. If there are, I'll try to also make sure to update the community tab, just make some community posts to be like, hey, sorry if it's been a while, but I got a new video coming, stuff like that. Hopefully I'll still be able to make some videos this year. I would really like to, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get some out. Hopefully like at least one a month. I'd like to get maybe one, possibly two if I can, out in a month. Again, I'm not gonna specifically commit to that, but hopefully I could at least get like a video out on like a monthly basis or so. And even if I don't, again, the short form reviews are gonna stay coming, so you guys will still see this face over here. Just making sure you guys are prepared if you don't see as many long form videos over this year. Either way, I've got some ideas. Hopefully I can make them happen, so stay tuned for that, but until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.